Buenos Aires, Argentina, the heart under siege. In Buenos Aires, the situation was equally dire. President Solis, from the underground bunker, listened to combat reports with stone-like stillness. The ground vibrated constantly, an echo of nearby explosions. And alien activity resonating through the depths of the earth. The joint military forces of Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Brazil, and Uruguay, together with Argentine special forces, fought tenaciously to contain the KRTAC advance toward the network nodes located beneath the city. And in the nearby Andes Mountains, one of the neuralgic points of the global system, multiple perimeter breaches reported in Puerto Madero. Alien units are heading for the underground energy distribution access points. I repeat, they're infiltrating the maintenance tunnels. An officer's voice broke with urgency. The extraterrestrials were not only attacking the surface, they sought the vital artery beneath the cities. The battle was a clash of worlds, of incompatible logics. The KRTAC technology, designed for the cold efficiency of galactic purges, met the chaotic, desperate resistance of a species fighting for survival. Humans used everything they had, the brute force of their armor, the pinpoint precision of their snipers, trying to find the few vulnerabilities of the invaders, the relentless fury of their infantry assaults. The aliens, in turn, displayed seamless coordination, adapting to human tactics with terrifying speed, focused unyieldingly on disabling the systems that hindered their true mission. To them, every human was an obstacle, every defense structure a nuisance to be eradicated. The air across the planet filled with the stench of war, smoke, scorched metal, the desolate scent of disintegrated matter and spilled blood. Humanity had shouted its challenge, and the KRTAC had answered with the fury of the storm. It was hell on earth, and the entire planet burned beneath the feet of its defenders and its relentless invaders. Chapter 19: The High Price of Resistance. Location: South American Joint Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time: hours after the initial assault. The roar of battle had faded, but the echo of war still resonated through the corridors of the underground bunker. The command room, lit by flickering screens, no longer showed the fervor of combat, but the cold and desolate accounting of the first phase of the invasion. World leaders, their faces marked by fatigue and shock, awaited the reports, each feeling the weight of the devastation in their nations. President Solis, his voice deep and barely audible, broke the silence. General Roca, begin the damage reports. Each nation must present its summary of the situation. We need to know what we lost, and what we gained. General Roca nodded and activated the communications link. The voice of General Sharma of India was the first to resonate, laced with forced stoicism. Indian Front. We have contained the main landings near New Delhi and Mumbai. The cost has been catastrophic. Civilian losses are estimated at 40 million, with nearly 200,000 military casualties. The infrastructure of both cities is beyond recovery. However, we destroyed 29 landing pods and temporarily disabled 74 ground units in direct combat. The counter-frequency nodes in our zones remain operational, though under constant siege. Resistance continues. A chill swept through the room. The magnitude of the devastation was overwhelming. Then, Lady Eleanor Finch, British Minister of Defence, took her turn, her voice more tense than usual. European Front, London, Paris, Berlin. All European capitals suffered direct strikes and massive landings. The metropolitan areas are devastated. Civilian casualties exceed 30 million, military, more than 300,000. We managed to shoot down 27 landing pods and eliminate 120 alien infantry units. Our main nodes, especially London's, are compromised, with alien infiltration at the deepest levels. We are losing ground. Communications are intermittent in several regions. Marshal Kuznetsov, speaking from Moscow, intervened, his voice as hard as ice. Eurasian Front, our vast territories experienced landings at multiple strategic points, targeting energy nodes in the Urals and Siberia. The cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg have been assaulted. Civilian casualties are estimated at 25 million, military at 250,000. We confirmed the destruction of more than 30 landing pods. Enemy ground units are extremely difficult to neutralize. Some nodes have been penetrated and are experiencing energy fluctuations. Fighting underground is fierce. The screen then focused on U.S. President John Maxwell, his face grim and weary, bearing the look of one who had seen too much horror. North American front, the main landings concentrated on coastal zones and key infrastructure hubs, including Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles. Civilian losses are immense, estimated at 45 million. Military losses exceed 400,000 personnel. Our forces fought back fiercely, shooting down 42 landing pods and disabling nearly 150 ground units. However, the primary defense node in the northeast is under enemy control, and multiple relay centers are compromised. We are reorganizing defenses for a counterattack, but the enemy's technological superiority is overwhelming in direct combat. From Africa, the voice of General Adissa Okoro of the African Union broke into the link, rough with pain and restrained fury. African front, the Sahara and the Horn of Africa were unexpectedly attacked, along with the coastal megacities. Their objective was the new solar energy nodes and water purification centers we had built. The devastation is swift and total. Civilian casualties exceed 20 million, with 180,000 military dead. We have only managed to disable 10 landing pods and a dozen of their units. Resistance is minimal where our defenses were sparse. Most of our counter-frequency systems in the impact zones have been neutralized. Finally, Chinese President Li Na delivered his report, his face expressionless but his eyes betraying an unfathomable pain. Asian front, China has borne the largest concentration of landings, the worst of the attacks, aimed at our main population centers and energy nodes in Beijing, Shanghai, and Chongqing. The density of interference here drew their greatest fury. Civilian casualties are incalculable, estimated at 100 million or more. Military losses exceed 500,000. We brought down 68 alien landing pods, the highest tally so far. We also confirmed the destruction of more than 350 ground assault units. However, Beijing's counter-frequency node is operating at only 40%, Shanghai's at 60%. Alien infiltration in our underground infrastructure is critical. They are closing in on the cores of our systems. President Solis, with a knot in his throat, gave his own report. South American front, landings here concentrated on capital cities and key points of our geo-energy network in Brasilia, Lima, Santiago, and Buenos Aires. Thanks to early evacuation and joint preparation between Argentina, Brazil, Peru, and Chile, civilian casualties have been proportionally lower, but still devastating. We estimate 10 million civilians lost, and 80,000 military personnel. We destroyed 12 landing pods and halted 55 ground units. Our nodes in the Andes are currently the most secure, but under constant watch. Defense is arduous, but we are coordinated and holding key positions. A sepulchral silence filled the room. The numbers were a gut punch. Hundreds of millions of lives lost in the first hours. Entire cities reduced to smoking ruins. Humanity had resisted, yes, and had inflicted some losses on the enemy, but at a cost that seemed unbearable. General Vance spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Global reports, including data from Australia, Central America, and other regions, reflect a similar situation: heroic resistance, but massive losses. They have achieved significant penetration in several vital points of our network. President Solis closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the tragedy pressing down on him. The Pyrrhic victory of downing some alien ships did not balance the massacre. The enemy is relentless. Their strategy is clear: disable our network. If they succeed, Earth will be exposed. We must hold the remaining nodes. At all costs. This is only the beginning. The first battle was over. Earth had refused to fall without a fight, and had proven it was more than just a passive resource. But victory, for the invaders, was not measured in lives, but in progress toward their objective. And the distant sound of more descent pods re-entering the atmosphere confirmed that the reign of shadows was far from over. Chapter 20: The Cold KRTAC Calculation. Location: Command Bridge of the Supreme Dreadnought Star Devourer, KRTAC Vanguard Fleet. Time, immediately after the completion of the first surface assault. The bridge of the Star Devourer showed no signs of emotion, only the cold efficiency of calculation. Emperor XYLR, towering on his tactical throne, observed the projections of Earth. The planet was no longer a lifeless blue sphere, but a vibrant map of captured control points and residual resistances. Lord Scientist Zarkin, Admiral Vale, General Rack, the Emperor's voice was calm, without a trace of earlier fury. Present the reports of the first deployment phase. Assess this entity's resistance. Quantify progress toward deactivating the interference. Zarkin was the first to activate his holoscreens, displaying intricate energy analyses superimposed over a three-dimensional map of Earth. Emperor. The terrestrial interference has proven more resilient than initially estimated. Our sensors confirm that the network of counter-frequency nodes remains active, though with a small global degradation in capacity. We have achieved full penetration of the primary node and disabled the secondary node. The fourth node operates at 40% capacity. This is significant progress, though with an efficiency rate below projections for a remote purge. Admiral Vale interjected. The descent units suffered losses. An unacceptable deviation from efficiency protocols, but within containment parameters given the objective and the unexpected resistance. The units encountered surprisingly coordinated opposition. General Rack, his voice harsh, added. The surface biological entities displayed physical and tactical resistance superior to initial projections for a Gamma-class civilization. Their kinetic and energy weapons, though primitive compared to ours, are effective at close range. Our assault units had to employ more firepower than expected to neutralize resistance points, resulting in losses among our combat units. This is but a small loss of the assault force deployed in this phase. It does not affect the operational capacity of the hegemony. Emperor XYLR studied the figures. KRTAC losses were insignificant in the vast scope of his empire. Human casualties, on the other hand, were massive, and the reduction of the interference was tangible. The inefficiency was an irritation, but the objective was being achieved. Progress is slow, but steady, XYLR decreed. The interference degrades. Their resistance is visceral, not strategic. They cannot sustain it. The second deployment phase will begin soon. Priority: the remaining counter-frequency nodes still operating at near full capacity in other sectors of this world. Zarkin, when do you estimate global interference will be reduced below 20%? With sustained pressure and a 30% increase in deployment rate, we estimate the interference could be reduced to 20% of its original capacity in the next assault, Emperor, Zarkin replied with precision. After that, surface purge and remote extraction of dark energy will be viable. XYLR nodded, a cold satisfaction in his gaze. So be it. Let the insolence of this world be silenced. Prepare the units for the next wave. The harvest must continue. The fleet in orbit, with the precision of a single organism, began preparing for the next descent. On Earth, the brief respite after the first assault was about to end.
Chapter 21, The Desperate Reorganization. Location: South American Ground Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time: hours after the reports of the first phase of the invasion. The silence in the South American Command Center was almost as oppressive as the roar of battle. The faces of the leaders across the screens, once marked by horror, now reflected a mixture of exhaustion and a renewed, ferocious determination. The cost of the first wave had been unimaginable, but humanity would not bow. President Solis rose to his feet, his voice hoarse but firm. We have paid a terrible price. Hundreds of millions of lives. Cities in ruins. But the defense network still stands, though wounded. The enemy will return. We must reorganize, mobilize every resource we have left. President Li Na, your reports indicated both the fiercest resistance and the heaviest losses. How is China preparing for the second wave? President Li Na stepped forward, his dark eyes shining with a cold light that was not fear, but a glacial fury. Honorable leaders. China has endured the unthinkable. We have lost more than 100 million souls in Beijing, Shanghai, and Chongqing. But the will of our people remains unbroken. We are reallocating the resources of our inland megacities. Every able citizen is being mobilized for the construction of new underground defenses and for the production of munitions. Our engineering battalions are working without rest to create fortified defense points around the remaining nodes. The fighting will be even more brutal underground, where their armored units have less room to maneuver. Marshal Kuznetsov of Russia nodded gravely. In Russia, we are mobilizing our last reserves. Our heavy armor, though overwhelmed in the first wave, will be deployed in compact formations, in urban zones. Our long-range artillery is being repositioned to sweep the expected landing areas, with new impact coordinates to compensate for their stealth. Elite snipers with deuterium-piercing rounds are searching for any weakness in the armor of those aliens. Every city will be a fortress. Every street, a cemetery for the enemy. President Maxwell of the United States nodded with solemnity. In North America, the cost of the first wave has forced us to reevaluate. Canada and Mexico will support us militarily in the defense of the nodes. We are prioritizing the remaining energy nodes, using a large-scale urban guerrilla strategy. Citizens are being armed and trained in hit-and-run tactics against alien units, leveraging their knowledge of the terrain. Our remaining fighters and drones will be used as decoys to distract, giving our ground teams a chance to flank them. We will search for their relay and supply points, if they have any, exploiting whatever logistical weakness they may possess. General Okoro, from the African Joint Command Center, added in a voice heavy with the bitterness of devastation, but also sharpened with new cunning. Our forces, though decimated, are learning. We have identified patterns in their movements. In Africa, local militia groups are using knowledge of the arid terrain and the cave networks to ambush them, cutting their advance toward the few remaining nodes. We fight with everything we have, if necessary, but also with the intelligence of the hunter. They have no respect for life, but the desert knows us, and it offers us both sanctuary and traps. President Solis concluded, his voice now filled with a fierce determination. In South America, our joint forces will continue the tenacious defense of the Andean nodes. Geography gives us an advantage few possess. We are mining underground access points, preparing explosive traps and fortresses within the mountains, using mining tunnels and ancient technological complexes. Each nation has lost too much to surrender. There is no turning back. Prepare yourselves. The second wave will be worse, and we must be ready to meet it with everything we have left. Humanity was rising from the ruins, not with the hope of an easy victory, but with the unbreakable resolve to make every inch of their world a hell for the invaders. Desperation had given way to a cold and calculating fury. Chapter 22, The Last Roll of the Dice. Location, Underground Military Command Center, Beijing, China. Time, immediately after the global video conference. The transmission ended, leaving President Li Na in the oppressive silence of his own command bunker in Beijing. The devastation of the first wave was an open wound at the heart of China. At least 100 million lives lost, and the capital, barely recognizable, defended itself by the fingernails from total annihilation. Li Na rose from his chair, ignoring the fatigue that burned in his muscles. He walked toward a secluded section of the room, where a series of secondary screens displayed complex diagrams of extraterrestrial anatomy and technology, data collected from the few enemy units they had managed to destroy or disable. There, a select group of scientists and engineers, their lab coats stained, worked without rest. They were the elite of China's military research, minds dedicated to deciphering the undecipherable. Dr. Chen, Engineer Gao, Li Na's voice was grave, but carried a note of urgency no one could miss. The global reports are clear. Resistance is fierce, but unsustainable in the long term. Their strategy is clear: disable our nodes to nullify our interference. But we have already discussed the futility of our nuclear warheads in the atmosphere or near Earth due to our own energy dispersal network. My question is, does any scenario exist where our nuclear arsenal could be effective against them? I mean a scenario beyond Earth, if for some reason they were forced to withdraw into space. Dr. Chen, a man with decades of experience in theoretical and energy physics, lifted his gaze, his eyes reflecting the intense focus of his mind. Mr. President, it is a question we have pondered since the first contact. And the answer is complex, but yes, such a scenario might exist. Engineer Gao, younger but with a sharp mind for reverse engineering, intervened, pointing to a projection showing Earth and the vast alien fleet in orbit. Our nuclear warheads retain their destructive power in the vacuum of space. The problem has always been the range and speed to strike such advanced targets. However, we have detected a specific energy vulnerability, not in their active shields, but in the transition phase of their intergalactic propulsion systems, particularly when they execute or prepare for a hyperspeed jump, or when they regroup in deep space after a prolonged incursion. Vulnerability? Li Na asked, his interest sharpened. Yes, Chen confirmed. Their ships, and indeed their assault units themselves, are intrinsically tied to the manipulation of dark energy. It is their essence. During those propulsion transitions or reorganizations, their internal energy fields flow in such a way that, for a moment, they become susceptible to a low-frequency disturbance with a massive energy signature, something a nuclear detonation can generate. It's not that their armor becomes weak, but that their control over dark energy briefly destabilizes. But they are still incredibly fast, and their detection systems are superior, Li Na interrupted. How would we get a warhead within, say, 5 to 10 million kilometers of the planet, and detonate it in such a narrow window? Engineer Gao activated a diagram of a long, slender missile with multiple propulsion stages. A secret interplanetary deterrence project developed years ago, designed to intercept threats such as asteroids or unidentified colonization ships at extreme distances. It is not a space combat missile, but a point injection vector. This missile incorporates a dark energy pulse acceleration module, Gao continued. Developed from the same technology of Earth's stabilization network, though with an offensive application. It does not grant the missile sustained hyperspeed like the alien ships, but it does allow for a final, massive, extremely rapid boost to cover astronomical distances in seconds, once it reaches cruising speed. This would give us a chance, however slim, to strike one of their motherships if it happened to be in the right vulnerability phase and at the correct distance. Li Na nodded slowly, his eyes processing the information. The fury on his face blended with a glint of cold cunning. Then it is not an option for this battle. But it is an option for a possible Pyrrhic victory. Analyze their transit and spatial reorganization patterns with the highest priority. If we manage to corner them enough that they consider withdrawal, we must be ready to execute that strike. It is the only real hope we have beyond resisting on our own soil. The scientists nodded, returning to their consoles with a new, grim urgency. The order needed no repetition. Humanity's survival might depend on finding the precise moment to strike the enemy where it would hurt most, even if it meant standing at the edge of the abyss. Chapter 23, The Desperate Summons. Location, Underground Military Command Center, Beijing, China. Time, immediately after Li Na's conversation with her engineers. The dim light of the Beijing bunker seemed to grow even dimmer for Li Na. The weight of what Dr. Chen and Engineer Gao had revealed settled heavily upon her. The last roll of the dice, as they had called it, was a fragile, almost illusory hope, but it was hope nonetheless. And every second was crucial. Li Na returned to the communications table, fatigue no longer mattered. Her voice, when she addressed her team, was as sharp as steel. Prepare an emergency meeting request. Immediately. A chance, however remote, to strike the aliens where it hurts most. I need to speak with President Solis, President Maxwell, Lady Finch, Marshal Kuznetsov. Everyone. Now. Minutes later, the holographic screens lit up again in the Buenos Aires bunker. The weary faces of world leaders appeared, carrying a mix of surprise and apprehension. President Solis was the first to speak. President Lee Na. What strategy do you have in mind? The second alien wave is imminent. What vital information has your team discovered? Lee Na did not mince words. Her gaze swept across all present. Honorable leaders. My research team, analyzing the remnants of alien ship technology and their energy patterns, has discovered a potential critical vulnerability. It is not for the current surface combat, but for a possible future scenario, should they ever be forced into a tactical withdrawal or distant reorganization. A wave of murmurs rippled across the connections. We have identified an energy pattern in their propulsion and shielding systems that, under very specific conditions of transition or regrouping in deep space, would make them susceptible to a massive low-frequency energy disruption. One that our nuclear warheads can generate, outside the influence of our counter-frequency network. President Maxwell leaned forward, eyes narrowing. We already dismissed nuclear use because of interference with our own defenses. How could this be different?